Hello and welcome to another episode of Judge a Character. As always, I'm your host, Steve. Well, we've covered one of the most famous asshole Christmas characters ever, but it feels like I'm forgetting something.
Humbug!
Wasn't there another one?
Humbug.
Some guy who was an asshole with a Christmas theme?
Humbug!
Whose name became synonymous with hating Christmas?
Humbug.
Huh, guess not. Well, hell, if that's the case, I'm gonna go listen to my new Steam-Powered Giraffe album.
You're forgetting one thing.
What? Who the hell are you?
I'm the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
But you're talking.
So, just because I'm the ghost of Christmas yet to come doesn't mean I'm mute.
Actually, yeah, that's kind of the bit. You're not supposed to talk. You're just supposed to stand there and point.
You're getting off topic. You're forgetting the most important Christmas character.
Santa Claus?
No! Scrooge, you dipstick!
Oh, yeah, that's right, with the bah humbug and everything. So, I guess...
Yes, you need courage, moron.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, that was weird. Here's Ebenezer Scrooge, everyone! While the term Grinch has become a common expression for someone who actively hates Christmas, it's not the first time we've come up with a term to indicate an asshole that originated from a fictional character. That particular honor belongs to Ebenezer Scrooge, the main character of that holiday classic, A Christmas Carol, written by Charles Dickens. Now, presumably most, if not all of you, already know what A Christmas Carol is and who Ebenezer Scrooge is, so I really feel like I shouldn't have to explain anything to you. But I know if I don't, I'm gonna get a ton of emails bitching about how I didn't explain anything. Or I would if this show had a large audience. So, right now I'd only get like 20 emails, if that. Yeah. Anyway, explanation time! A Christmas Carol, which was published in 1843, tells the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, a cold-hearted cheapskate who has an immense hatred for the poor, people in general, and especially the holiday Christmas. When the story begins, we're introduced to Scrooge as he goes about his day, hating the holidays and rebuffing everyone around him, including his nephew Fred and his employee Bob Cratchit. He's then visited by the ghost of his former partner Jacob Marley, who warns him that he's quickly headed to a very unpleasant afterlife if he keeps up his jerk-ass attitude, and that he will be visited by 3 other ghosts with the intent to change his ways for the better. Too bad the Ghostbusters run around to solve that little problem.
Leave me be! Don't just stand there, man! Do something!
You think nobody's ever heard of the word please?
Young says no! You do him far more disservice than us!
Release us, or you and all Christmases to come will pay the price!
Yeah, we've heard it before.
No! You've done it! I'm as happy as an angel!
That actually happened? Holy crap, I don't remember that episode. As the ghosts visit Scrooge, he's treated to visions of the past, present, and possible future to show how he came to be and what will happen if he doesn't change his ways. The story ends with Scrooge seeing the light and changing his ways, becoming a happier guy who loves the holidays. Hallelujah! A Christmas Carol has become a classic piece of literature, and Scrooge himself is an iconic character with numerous adaptations and interpretations. But why? What makes Scrooge such a memorable character? It certainly can't be his sunny disposition. So let's find out together, shall we? Before we can talk about the character of Ebenezer Scrooge, we have to understand the story itself. A Christmas Carol was published in 1843 in early Victorian-era Britain. Christmas was in an interesting flux at the time. On the one hand, there was a certain nostalgia for the old traditions of Christmas, while on the other hand, new traditions, such as the Christmas tree and holiday greeting cards, were starting to appear. At the same time, this was also the period of the Industrial Revolution, a period of time which had a massive effect on the world, both good and bad. Although some groups would have you believe that this era was nothing but awesome. While I obviously don't agree with their idea of history, I gotta admit they wear some awesome clothes, so they get a free pass. Steampunk is awesome. One young man was influenced heavily by the effects of the Industrial Revolution, and his name was Charles Dickens. Seeing how things were for the less fortunate, as well as having lived in those conditions himself, spurred Dickens to do something, anything, to change it. Originally he was going to write a political pamphlet about the whole thing, but changed his mind and decided to write a Christmas carol instead. That's right, folks. This classic and beloved Christmas story was basically a political piece, the author's soapbox on how bad shit was for the poor back then. Mind you, that's not a bad thing. Remember, if it weren't for the ire that Dickens felt, this story would have never existed, and we would have never had Scrooge. Now that you understand the basic idea of the story, perhaps things from this point on will be a little bit clearer. Let's continue. To be perfectly honest, as far as Scrooge is concerned, the only truly memorable thing about the character is his development. The whole point of the story is how Scrooge goes from being a crotchety, mean-spirited old miser to a kind and caring man with a love of the holidays. True, there's other aspects to the character, but the development is the big one, so it's the one that we're going to be focusing on the most. Scrooge's character development is achieved by the visit of technically four separate spirits, whose goal is to change Scrooge for the better. The first is his old partner Marley. Wrong Marley, but I like your way of thinking. No, I actually mean Jacob Marley, Scrooge's old business partner, who died 7 years prior to the start of the story. He shows up at Scrooge's house on Christmas Eve to show what's become of him in the afterlife. Marley is now bound in chains and forced to roam the earth for eternity as penance for his life of greed and wretchedness. He warns Scrooge that if he does not change his ways, a similar fate awaits him. In fact, Scrooge's fate would be worse, with chains far heavier waiting for him. He also tells Scrooge that he will soon be visited by 3 other ghosts, all in an attempt to avert his horrible fate. This is the part where Scrooge's development as a character becomes interesting. Basically, the next whole section of the book can be broken down into 3 separate parts, each involved by the 3 different ghosts. Each one serves a purpose to instigate that change in Scrooge that is so desperately needed. In fact, you could argue that the way in which the spirits interact with Scrooge is essentially a complete deconstruction of Scrooge himself. In order for Scrooge to truly find his redemption, the spirits basically have to break him down and completely rebuild him.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
The first spirit serves to break Scrooge down by taking him into the past and showing him how he came to be the man he is. The spirit shows Scrooge events from his past, each to highlight how he came to be. For instance, the spirit shows Scrooge's father kicking him out as a child, forcing him to live on the streets until his teens. This shows us where Scrooge's lack of social skills comes from. With no family unit to be raised with, he never learned how to socialize or even empathize. But it goes even further, showing Scrooge as he grows and enters the world of business, where he develops his workaholic tendencies. These tendencies later destroy his one romantic relationship as he continues to ignore her in favor of making more money he doesn't really need, leading her to leave him. All of this serves the purpose of showing both Scrooge and the audience his origins as an asshole, which are important to the later development of the character. If we didn't know his asshole origins, then any effect that the ghosts would have had later would have been in vain. Pretty much a lot like treating the disease, but not the symptom.
Remove the cause, but not the symptom.
I'm not entirely sure that's appropriate for a Christmas episode. Is it? Anyway, let's move on to the next spooky specter, the Ghost of Christmas Present. Now, while the Ghost of Christmas Past and Yet to Come are easy to talk about and understand, the Ghost of Christmas Present is a little trickier. You see, Past and Yet to Come are meant to show where Scrooge came from and where he's headed if he doesn't change. So what's the point of Present? Well, basically, Present is meant to show Scrooge things that are happening at the very moment in and around the city, both good and bad, and how they are affected by him and his behavior. These include his nephew, who still cares for Scrooge despite how he was treated earlier, and the Cratchit family. Now, the scene with the Cratchit family is a major turning point in the story. Scrooge actually witnesses the way the family lives and is especially touched when he sees Tiny Tim. There's a good reason that this scene is included in every adaptation ever since it was published. It's at this point that Scrooge's attitude truly begins to shift for the better, with him asking about Tiny Tim's illness and if anything can be done about it. Of course, the ghost takes this moment to throw back a phrase that Scrooge himself said earlier, mentioning that Tiny Tim should go ahead and die, thus decreasing the surplus population. Upon hearing his own words repeated at him, Scrooge is filled with self-loathing and becomes even more of a changed man. But how to ensure the change sticks? How about a brush with death?
I'm not deaf.
Can't you just stick with the script?
Can't you just get me right?
You look just like Death!
So, Kirsten Stewart looks like a decent actress. We all know how much she sucks. Always the one.
Anyway, the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is the final spirit to visit Scrooge. His sole purpose is to show Scrooge what will happen in 1 year's time if he does not change his ways for the better. He does so by showing that his death will be a lonely one, celebrated only by those who disliked him. His funeral will be attended by only his detractors and his belongings stolen and sold to others. He's then shown imagery of the Cratchit family, minus one member. This visit to the Cratchits shows how Scrooge could have and should have used his wealth to help others, instead of hoarding it all for himself. Finally, the spirit takes Scrooge to a graveyard, revealing the final cold truth: Ebenezer's own grave. With everything that has happened up to this point, the spirits and their visions, Scrooge has finally reached his epiphany and has made the change. He now holds the meaning of Christmas close to his heart, and makes every attempt to right the wrongs of his past and be a better person overall. So in the end, the story comes down to one major point. Don't be a dickhead! Here, I'll illustrate basically what the story's trying to do, okay? Story. Point. Watch carefully now. Okay, so, I think we all get the idea of what Dickens was trying to do. I don't think I need to explain any more or give any more examples, do I? Right? Anyway, so yeah, Scrooge's development as a character is a major point of the story, but that's not the only thing he's got going for him, right? Oh, ouchie. When it comes to what makes Scrooge a memorable character, he actually shares a lot of the same elements as the Grinch. He's a villain protagonist, he develops over the course of the story, etc. This makes sense, as no doubt Scrooge was part of the inspiration for the Grinch. However, there are a few differences. While Grinch was a simple character, Scrooge is more complex. We see how he became the way he is, and how it affects his life and the lives of those around him. On top of that, Scrooge's path to redemption is more involved. Whereas the Grinch just had to hear some people singing carols, Scrooge has to be completely emotionally beaten to submission. This makes Scrooge a more interesting character because he has more to go through. Well, that can't be all. Hell, if that's all, you could just go back and watch my Grinch episode and apply everything I said there to Scrooge. What now?
Adaptations.
Oh yeah! You want proof of how well known this story and Scrooge are? Just look at the number of adaptations. There are literally over 100 different ones, all of different flavors. And with each adaptation, we see a new version of Scrooge. Scrooge has been played by so many different actors, there's no way I could list them all and keep this episode under an hour. So I'll just go through some favorites. Let's see, there's Basil Rathbone, Albert Finney, Marcel Marceau, the famous mime, he was a Scrooge. Walter Matthau, Henry Winkler, even Patton himself, George C. Scott, he was a Scrooge. Bill Murray.
God damn it, Bill fucking Murray!
Thank you, Tallahassee. Tim Curry, Jack Palance, Jim Carrey, and my personal favorite, Michael Caine. Yeah, Scrooge has been played by numerous people over the years, including Patrick freaking Stewart.
But shut up, Wesley.
Each version of Scrooge has brought something unique to the role while still maintaining the core element of the character that has kept him in our consciousness since 1843. Everyone's got their favorite Scrooge that they know and love, that Scrooge that just appeals to us the best. Mine happens to be Michael Caine from Muppet Christmas Carol. This was the first introduction to the tale I ever had and has been a holiday favorite of mine since. This version is required viewing at my house when Christmas rolls around. Yeah, it's got the Muppets, so it's a tad corny at times, but the message is still there and it's still good viewing, so sue me. You know, I think I've covered just about everything there is about Scrooge.
And what have you learned?
Well, Scrooge is a memorable character for a lot of reasons. His development as a character, since it is the main plot point, is the most remembered aspect of the character. In fact, it's one of the best examples of character development in history, I believe. There's also the fact that Scrooge is a well-defined character, with a well-established backstory and is well-written. But really, in the end, I believe Scrooge is a memorable character because he's a reminder of what we're all capable of. Change. We all have our asshole moments, and while they may not be as bad as Scroogey boys, they can still cause problems. But it is in our power to fix it. So that's it. Scrooge is a good reminder of what we're capable of. And, I'm your host, Steve, reminding all of you to stay in character. You know the drill.